I appreciate and I want to thank the Korean government for considering and inviting me to this presentation. And I'm really honored to be with all of you today to discuss some of the practices that we've done in Latin America to actually prevent the surgence of antimicrobial resistance. But what are the implementation that we had? What is the monitoring that we already have in place, the successes, and of course, the failures that we have learned from. Okay, an overview of this presentation. The first part, we will talk in a little bit how is the industry in Latin America, how we produce milk in Latin America, and then the reasons for the use of antimicrobials in dairy operations that we have, practices to reduce the use of antimicrobials to prevent the occurrence of IMR. More importantly, factors affecting the use of antimicrobials to our understanding in Latin America. And also, we are going to move forward to the characteristics of dairy production on some selected countries, on the rest of the countries in Latin America, what we can learn from that. And of course, later we will summarize the challenges, the work that we have to do, what we have learned from that, and where we are. The dairy industry in Latin America, if you compare with the rest of the world, actually today we are at the IDF World Dairy Situation. Asia produces a third of the milk production. The other 20% is North America, roughly. EU is 21% today in the morning, and Latin America produces about 10%. This is South America, which is a little bit same, but it's 10% of the milk production. So we don't produce too much milk, but what are this Latin American group compound about? The first thing is a large area of the world with a big potential to produce milk. But the milk that is produced in Latin America is very special. We have from A to B and C qualities. So first thing, we need to know the main dairy producers in Latin America. I will select Uruguay first. They're the most dairy producers. Argentina, Brazil, which is increasing their milk production. But also Chile, with a lot of technology and stuff, but we don't produce too much. But also it's part of this southern cone. And also Colombia. And the rest of the country that I will talk later. But what are the main reasons for the use of antimicrobials in dairy operations? In Latin America, but I would say everywhere. This is Tine van Berden from Utrecht University. She has visited many times, and according to what we have learned in Chile and elsewhere, the numbers are the same. Roughly 70 to 75% of the antimicrobials that are used on dairy operations, they are applied to the mammary gland. Either you use it for mastitis treatment, for dry cow treatments, even some other treatments, but they are aimed for other health. So when you think about limiting the antimicrobial use in their operations, probably the best idea is to start with the bigger problem. So, like I said, antimicrobials are used for clinical mastitis, for subclinical, let's say, intramammary infections of dairy cows, but also dry cow treatment. We know we have new trends about dry cow treatment, like selective dry cow treatment, but again, when you think about selective dry cow therapy in Latin America, you have to think, what is the selecting criteria that you are going to use for that? Is that somatic cell count? Individual somatic cell count? What if you don't have that? What if you only have CMT in place or something else? Is the same rationale? So, well, we can discuss that later. But these are the main reasons for the use of antibiotics. So the common sense tells you, if you have better other health, the less antibiotics are going to use. So what are the practices to reduce the use of antimicrobials to prevent the occurrence of IMR in their operations in Latin America? Okay, we have this different. We have, if I have to select one practice to prevent the use of antimicrobial, someone asked me once, what is the best antibiotic to use to treat a dairy cow that is suffering from mastitis? And I would respond, the one that you never used, because you prevented that to happen in the first place. So the best first practice is prevention. Sounds like a common word, but it's actually true. Prevention is the best first practice. So when we don't have too much time to be occupied with many things, so you have to prioritize where the prevention is going to be. So you have two choices. Either you put a prevention in hygiene or the prevention of transmission from cow to cow. So the decision for that prevention depends on whatever the diagnostic you have. What are the pathogens that are involved in your operation, in that operation particular? If you don't have that, probably you can't focus on one of these. So it's well known, simple epidemiology. The causes of intramammary infections depends whether it's environmental source, meaning E. coli, Klebsiella, Strep uveris, or contagious transmission, Strep agalactia, Staph aureus. So you have to concentrate differently. We have learned, but the question is, okay, what happened? Okay, let's go back where we were. So the question is, to learn, what if you have this scenario or that scenario, you have to have basic diagnostic on farm. The second practice sounds basic, but it's also really true. I would summarize as know your numbers. Know your basic numbers. What are the basic of the basic numbers for a dairy operation? Or to compare with other ones. The first, how many clinical cows you have a month for every 100 cows? Some expert would say the incidence rate per 100 cows a month. But how many new cases do you have a month? Is that 5%? It's more than 5%? It's less than 2%? That number should be in place so you can monitor. The other thing is to have a simple monthly average of bull tank somatic cell count. That simple number is not available for all dairy operations in Latin America. Most of them, good large operations, they do have that, but you need to compare the numbers. Is your bull tank somatic cell count below 200,000? Is above 400,000? That should be compared. And of course, whether you evaluate that using CMT or using individual somatic cell count for cows, you should know what percentage of your herd is affected by intramammary infections. And that is necessary because with that you can put some realistic goals. This is an actual picture I took in some country, English-speaking country, where this is the current somatic cell count, and that was the goal. I hope the goal was long-term goal because it's not short or middle-term goal. So that's caused frustration, and it's not in the plan to achieve some change. The other third that I would think of is implementation of clear protocol for all antimicrobial therapy of the herd. And that should be discussed, should be clear, should be discussed with the administrator, with the other vet, whichever people make decisions. And of course, if you have a clear protocol, you can monitor, you can reevaluate, and you can adjust that protocol. If you have a protocol, you know by heart that you can, for example, if you have diagnostics, there's some pathogen there's no need to treat. For example, Mycoplasma bovis, Nocardia, Prototheca, Pseudomonas, Pasteurella yeast, Serratia, Ruperella. There's no need to put any antibiotic if you have that in the diagnostic. If you have a protocol, you save all that antibiotic. Those three are obvious, are common, but this is more, I would say, like heterogeneous, not really solid, but everyone speaks about biosecurity. But when you talk in Latin America about biosecurity, they think, okay, yes, we'll do it. We do whatever we can. And we actually test, this is a publication of our group led by Dr. Latourie. We published in JDS last year, and we evaluated in 23 dairy herds, all the Staph aureus, and we did PFG testing for all of them, and we found that pathogenic bacteria, meaning Staph aureus, from biofilms, can be a source for bull-tank milk contamination. And we found the same strains in the milk that we found in the biofilms. But more importantly, we found that identical pathogenic pulsotypes can be found in milk and biofilms in dairy farms that were very distant from each other. And this is PFG. It's very specific. So the likeliness of having the same pulsotype is really unusual. But let's see. I'll show you that. So these were really distant, and we found the same someone in the same district, some in the close by district. But for example, this is Chile, this is Argentina. Look at this dairy farm here. These other 23, 72 kilometers apart. We found the same pulsotype. How come? So the question is, could biofilm contain IMR pathogenic bacteria potentially spread beyond the farms and even go and reach the dairy processor? We don't know. But what are the causes for this? Is it spread because the sale of chronically infected cows, personal turnover, farm visits, including the veterinarian, even the bull-tank milk handling, the milk truck could be the culprit. And that would be a bad news because they can take from farm A a distance from B or even to the processor. We don't know. And also we don't know if those potentials Staph aureus could also have IMR. So first thing, have biosecurity in place if you want to control the spread of IMR. So I'm going to show a summary of some of the factors affecting the antimicrobial use in Latin America according to our understanding or to our knowledge of the countries in Latin America. So it's our version. So the first factors affecting the use of antimicrobials, I would say, who has granted access to antimicrobials in Latin America? Is it the veterinarian? Is anyone in the farm? So if you have that answer, you have to control that. The existence of written, well-explained, and valid on-farm protocol for antimicrobial use that we already mentioned. Of course, the health status of the herd. If you have a healthy, in any sense, herd, the less antibiotics you're going to use. So the disease prevention measures in place in operations, of course, are also important. The off-label use of antimicrobials The off-label use, some people may think it's not very usual, but we have reports even from the US and elsewhere in the world that we know that off-label use is not that uncommon. The important thing is to know how much is that. The use of antimicrobials when they are not necessary, like we recently said, and for that we need diagnostic and curation rate. For example, you have a Staph aureus entomomar infection, and that is chronic, many months. There's no need to put any antibiotics. There's no way we're going to cure the cow. But if you have, for example, a recent infection in a heifer, probably it's a good idea to do it. So that needs a well-written and explained protocol. And also, of course, there's country-specific legislation on the use of antimicrobial, which is different. Some countries in Latin America are more strict, like my country, it's very strict. Protocols, we can buy any antibiotic, it's mandatory by the government, but others are just free. You're free to go and buy whatever you want. Of course, but even in my country, it also depends of the country's particular ability to make law enforcement and monitoring of compliance, to have enough people to monitorize the compliance of the law. And that is equally or more important. So let's look at some of the characteristics of how milk is produced in Latin America, and how this may affect the control of on-farm antibiotics in specific countries. Let's look at this picture. Literally half of the milk that is produced in the world go through processed industrial channels, formal channels. The other half, roughly, go to informal market where it's not processed or minimum processing, industrial processing. That's the reality. 2021, report from IDF. I just looked at it in the morning. The next report, it doesn't change. It's half and half. But, so we have two situations. We have milk farm collection through the industrial channels. This is a picture of it's a recent picture from a truck taking the milk from small dairy producers in southern Chile. So they pick up, they control the milk quality, and they took it to the processor. That's good. But we have this other reality in many countries in Latin America. They pick up whatever they milk in the dairy operation, and they took it to the seller. Or they sell themselves. What do we know about this milk? Let's see. How much is how much in a few countries in Latin America? According to self-reporting, please, self-reporting of every country. We have the best in the class here, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay. We can include Mexico also. But according to Argentina, 100% of the milk they produce go through formal channels. Okay. Chile says that 7% go through informal channels and 93% go to formal channel. Uruguay, 9%. Mexico, 16% informal channels, and they go Brazil, 70-30, and Costa Rica, 40-60, are very good Costa Ricans. Peru, 50-50. Colombia, 55%. But Venezuela, Paraguay, Bolivia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua, they do not report. According to FAO, 80% of the milk that is produced is in developing country go through informal channels. But what this really means, what is the benefit of selling the milk to a good processor? they have in place milk payment, I would say, quality assessment monitoring system. Because with every load, the microbial content is evaluated, CFU, SPC, total bacterial count, name it, book down somatic cell count. You have twice a month of every day. Antimicrobial content qualitative assessment is done every time. And solids, of course, protein, fat, blah, blah, blah. And some processors even test for mycotoxins, contaminants evaluation, environmental practice compliance, even herd, and they pay extra for having in place herd disease systems, control systems. So it's good. This is a self-sampling system in a truck, milk truck in Chile. On the other side, what do we have for informal channel? We have raw milk that is being sold directly without processing. But what are the reasons for people to consume raw milk? Culture, because I'm used to. Availability is there, and it's cheaper. Taste tastes better, according to certain people. Nutrients, I'm not going to go in that, but nutrients, you know what I mean. Misinformation. But we have a few questions here. First, what is the microbial content of that? And beyond, what is the antimicrobial content of that milk? What is the IMR? What is the risk? We know the risk. We have the very good speaker that we're presenting. We know the risk. But so how frequent is antimicrobial residue violations in commercial channels? It's really rare for Chile. This is a 2013 report that I prepared. We found 0.67% of the milk loads were positive. And that trends go really, really starkly down. But we don't know what happened of antimicrobial residue violation or IMR organism in informal milk. And we don't have any chance to know it. But even beyond that, for good dairy producers, we have another phenomenon that I'm going to explain to you. We have I call the first and second tank phenomenon. They have a standard herd, and that herd usually had the good cows and the bad cows. The good cows are the healthy cows without intermammary infection, low somatic cell count, and they milk those cows first. And all that milk goes to this tank, which eventually has low somatic cell count, no antibacterial residue, of course, low count of pathogenic bacteria coming from the IMI and intermammary infections. And then the second group goes. And this second group have high somatic cell count, is likely to have contaminant and residues positive, high counts of pathogenic bacteria. They sell that to the processor, and they sell that to a small processor. They gain this, and they get in this way. And we may have another situation, bulk tank 1, and have the cows separate the milking with the same milking machine with a diverting hose to a milk cow. Same thing. But are these practices safe for the herd, or even for the people? What do we know? This is a paper that our group published just last month. It's August 26 in Frontiers. And in a farm visit, in several farm visits, we noticed that the hoses that were used to divert the milk, to milk those particular cows, have visible biofilms. So we took them and analyzed them using scanning microscope, confocal microscope, and we actually cultured them. What did we find? What did we find? Pathogenic bacteria in those biofilms. The first thing, it's a very interesting biofilm, multi-species. Every single organism were commingled together. And we found Staph aureus, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Klebsiella pneumonia, Klebsiella oxytoca, so typical pathogens. So we learned that hosts that are used to deliver the waste milk with antibiotics, transition milk, or colostrum can be a source of biofilm and pathogenic bacteria. Also, the waste milk is commonly used to fill calves and may be sold for human consumption, that I explained before, and can go through informal channels with antibiotics. So the use of separate hoses to divert milk from cows undergoing antibiotic treatment or mastitis, and the ones that are used to collect colostrum or transition milk, which is healthy, reportedly, should be different, not the same hose. And that should be a practice, but it's not defined. And the waste milk used to feed calves also constitute a biosecurity issue, a source of pathogen for adult cows, for the young stock, but also an exposure if that milk is being sold for humans. So we conclude that the waste milk handling and use should be regulated, and it's not. But let's take the good things. There's many very good dairy operations that monitor the health, strive for good quality, and do good things. These are two examples. This is a central zone near Santiago dairy operation, and this is a southern robotic milking. Those are very good, and they do a very good job. But not also the large producers do a good job. This is an example of milk quality antimicrobial testing and milk quality assessing in Peru with a small producer, thanks to Dr. Roberto Romero from Peru. And we have a small producer with a tank, with cans, and they evaluate the milk quality, including antibiotic content, and they can trace back if any violation occurs. So this can be done even for small producers. These are the good examples of monitoring. So what do we know about the trends of antimicrobial resistance? Not much is known in Latin America. We were fortunate to have a 2002 evaluation by Dr. San Martin at that point. And we did another evaluation in the year 2017. We published that in the annual meeting of NMC in 2018. We found that most of the cultures for our operation were CNS, coagulase negative, Staph aureus, Strep uveris, and less frequent 6% E. coli, Strep galaxia, and we don't have a galaxia for this testing. And when we compared antimicrobial resistance with the previous report, we found that actually we have an increase in susceptibility. We were flabbergasted about that. And actually, when we compared that, Pam Rueck in Wisconsin and Ron Erskine have found the same thing in also Ron in Michigan, same low trend of antimicrobial resistance, but we have to admit, these are the good guys of the class. So probably the ones that send their milk for culture are not representative of all the dairy producers. So we're skewed a little bit in this. So when you think of monitoring, you should monitor the particular use of antimicrobials on farm. And the worst thing that could happen, it really happened really often, is the use that is off-label use. For example, Session3, yesterday Carolee mentioned that, is a third-generation cephalosporin. It's already banned in Chile, but not anywhere else. But in some countries, most of their usage of Session3 is for parental use. We know that Session3 doesn't reach, okay, 5 minutes, okay. Session3 doesn't reach the mammary gland. So there's no need. It won't do nothing. But they want to make sure, and they put a parental beside the one that goes into mammary. So definitely the off-label use of antimicrobials should be closely regulated. But for that, some work is being done in different countries in Latin America, most of them in the southern cone, meaning Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, like therapeutic training course. I was younger at that point. In Uruguay, or some others, these are publications that are written in easy language for the producers, for a stockman person, everything, to learn how to handle and to put some preventive measures in place. So I'm going to go fast. On-farm monitoring, you have monitoring of the cases, know the causes, take samples, discuss the results, monitor the changes, evaluate incidence rate, monthly incidence rate, know the causes of intramural infection, and of course, record every single treatment. Sounds easy, but it's really, really hard. It's the source of all the frustration of practitioners. Try to make this happen. But definitely, they should emphasize a probably required by law. So, good thing, I'm going to make it on time. The final consideration and conclusion that we could draw from this. First, recognize large dairy processors in Latin America have high standard for antimicrobial traceability procedures. Definitely. We have very good example. I can highlight Costa Rica, Dos Pinos, or Argentina, Uruguay, Chile itself, Colombia. They have good standards, high standards. Few countries in Latin America have most of their milk collected and processed by former large dairy processors. It's not common. Most of them don't. Practices of antimicrobial use in Latin America are mostly unknown and in many cases uncontrolled in small operations. Please, mostly unknown and uncontrolled in small operations. The risk of antimicrobial residues in milk is high in informal small dairy producers in Latin America. Is there any willingness to test the antimicrobial content? Probably should be. But also, on the other side, small dairy processors do not always have antimicrobial detection methods for their purchased milk. They do not test. They buy cheap, and they do not test. Antimicrobial contaminated waste milk may have a regular, although informal distribution market, posing a risk for foodborne antimicrobial resistant pathogen in the communities. Monitoring the frequency of antimicrobial residue violations in bull-time milk as a part of a state surveillance should be accessible to achieve proper monitoring. What I mean with this? If you want to know if this particular processor, how many events of antimicrobial violations in their milk have, or the frequency, you can have that information. It's private. And at least monitoring parties should have access to that information for transparency, because this is not a commercial thing. It's a public health issue. So finally, the surveillance of antimicrobial resistant pathogenic organisms from their operation should be part of a public health mandatory policies in Latin America. So thank you so much for your attention.